his article in French is called Contribution to the Study of the Toxic Beverages of the Indians of the Northwest Amazon. After several hours of feeling poisoned, he did everything he could to return to normalcy, and drank several cups of coffee and sniffed ether. And his overall conclusion was that ayahuasca worked because it was a form of strychnine poisoning. In the 1930s, American anthropologist Irving Goldman lived among the Cubeo Indians in the Colombian Amazon and reported on their use of yaqui or ayahuasca. He wrote that the Cubeo do not use ayahuasca for the pleasure of its hallucinations, but for the intensity of the total experience. He writes, "I spoke to no one who did it for pleasure." Goldman only published his account in 1963, almost 30 years after the fact, and he did not say whether he tried the capi himself. So anthropologists have had difficulty dealing with ayahuasca. But when you look at it historically, you can see that they've also had difficulty dealing with shamans and shamanism in general. So for example, during the first half of the 20th century, the popular theory among anthropologists was that shamans were mentally ill. After all, they take their hallucinations seriously. And so well-respected anthropologists like Weston LeVar or Ralph Linton or Alfred Kroger all went on record stating that they believed shamans were psychotics. In 1949, French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss turned this notion on its head. He said, shamans are not mentally ill, rather they are like psychoanalysts. The difference between these two practitioners being, according to Lévi-Strauss, that the shaman speaks, whereas the psychoanalyst listens. And this comparison allowed Western thinkers to start taking shamans seriously. On a material level, theoretical, analytical level, but on the material level, several sciences have played a key role in opening up rational inquiry to the knowledge of shamans. During the first half of the 20th century, scientists discovered the power of hallucinogens such as LSD and mescaline. They discovered that small quantities of these substances could radically modify a person's perception of the world. This indicated that hallucinogenic plants, which contain hallucinogenic substances, worked by modifying brain chemistry rather than by superstition and suggestion. American ethnobotanist Richard Evans Schultes and Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, who synthesized LSD from a fungus and discovered psilocybin in mushrooms used by Mexican shamans, did much to bring about the realization that shamanic plant mixtures like ayahuasca or plants like psilocybin mushrooms or the San Pedro cactus all contain substances that activate the human brain. So science showed that when it comes to neurochemistry, scientists, shamans are no imposters. And an ethnobotanist like Richard Evans Schultes gave his life to the plant knowledge of the indigenous people of the Amazon and did much to demonstrate the deep knowledge that indigenous Amazonian shamans have of plant properties. Arno described how complex the ayahuasca brew is. Another key discovery, and Schultes played an important role in this, was curare. Curare is an Amazonian hunting poison. It's a necessary combination of several plants. They have to be boiled together for hours, and the resulting paste is orally inactive. It only works when it's injected under the skin, which is to the advantage of the hunters who use it, because you can actually eat the meat that you kill with curare. Curare works it was discovered in the 1940s by paralyzing all muscles, including the automatic breathing muscles. In fact, when Amazonian hunters kill monkeys by shooting curare-tipped arrows into them, the monkeys let go of the branches because they would otherwise wrap their tails around the branch and die out of reach. But because curare relaxes all muscles, they fall down from the tree, and they actually die from asphyxiation because the curare stops the automatic breathing muscles. Well, when science discovered in the 1940s that this was how curare worked, it had finally put its hands on the first muscle paralyzer. And on the basis of curare, they synthesized the active ingredient, tubocurarine. All of modern surgery is based. In other words, it was not possible before curare to open up the torso and operate the vital organs. So modern surgery is based on this Amazonian hunting poison, which itself is a sophisticated concoction. Meanwhile, regarding ayahuasca itself, we also are dealing with a necessary combination of several plants, as Arno explained. It was only understood at the end of the 1960s or early 1970s that ayahuasca functioned by combining an orally inactive hallucinogenic substance, dimethyltryptamine, with several monoamine activase inhibitors. Schultes commented, after spending 30 years of his life focusing on these questions, including the composition of ayahuasca and the use of ayahuasca, that it enters deeply into all aspects of the life of the people who use it to an extent reached by hardly any other hallucinogen. But despite the writings, publications of scientists such as Schultes and the writings of Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs and their Yahe letters, which was published in 1963, anthropologists were slow at seeing that the natives had a brew that could allow you to see and understand things. The first anthropologist to realize the power of ayahuasca is called Michael Harner. This American anthropologist lived with the Jigaro-Shwa people in the 1950s, and in the early 1960s with the Carnivo-Shipibo people. And he was initiated to the ayahuasca of the Shipibo in 1961, and he published a brief account of his experience in an academic journal in 1968, and his initial account was one paragraph long, and he declared, I found myself in a world beyond my wildest dreams. I met bird-headed people and dragon-like creatures, and I realized that anthropologists, myself included, had deeply underestimated the impact of the drug on native ideology. Well, it took Harner another 12 years to provide a complete account of his experience, and so it was in 1980 that he did this. But at that point, many of his colleagues considered that he had crossed a line and was